In previous episodes, we talked about the southern half of the Hudson River Park. In this episode, we will talk about Chelsea Piers and its adjacent neighborhood. As you head towards the river from West Chelsea, you will come across Chelsea Piers, a sports and entertainment complex made up of 3 piers. It offers a range of activities, including a golf driving range, a climbing wall, ice skating rinks, bowling alleys, gyms, and even spaces for weddings. The brand that runs this complex is also called Chelsea Piers. However, the term Chelsea Piers originally referred to a series of piers along Chelsea's waterfront that were completed in 1910, meant for docking transatlantic passenger ships. There were 9 piers in total, all connected by a continuous building facade on the landside. The original Chelsea Piers was designed by the architectural firm Warren & Wetmore, who later went on to design New York's Grand Central Terminal. We've previously mentioned Manhattan's lost 13th Avenue when talking about Gansevoort Peninsula. The reason 13th Avenue disappeared was to make way for Chelsea Piers. After its completion in 1910, Chelsea Piers served as a passenger ship terminal until the 1930s. In 1912, the RMS Titanic was supposed to dock at Pier 59 in Chelsea Piers, but after the disaster, the survivors were brought to Pier 54 instead. Then in 1915, a ship departing from Pier 54 was sunk by a German U-boat on its way to Europe. This event was one of the reasons the US decided to enter World War I. By the 1930s, passenger ships had grown larger and more luxurious, requiring bigger piers to dock. But the waterway at Chelsea Piers couldn't accommodate longer piers due to width limitations. As a result, New York City built a series of longer piers further north along the Hell's Kitchen waterfront for the new passenger liners. The original Chelsea Piers then shifted to handling freight ships. During World War II, American troops were sent to the European front from Chelsea Piers. However, by the 1960s, even freight ships couldn't dock there anymore because modern cargo shipping required larger port facilities and connections to the truck and highway systems, something Manhattan just couldn't offer. Most shipping companies relocated to New Jersey or Brooklyn, leaving Chelsea Piers largely abandoned, with some piers even being demolished. It wasn't until 1995 that the government leased Piers 59, 60, and 61, the ones that hadn't been torn down, to a private company, transforming them into the sports and entertainment center we see today. The rent from this complex accounts for about a quarter of Hudson River Park Trust's funding each year. In 2022, after public discussions and negotiations, Chelsea Piers and HRPT signed a new lease, extending the original 49-year term to 59 years and increasing the rent. On the other side of Chelsea Piers, between the piers and the High Line, is an area filled with upscale condos and art galleries. We've touched on this in our episode about the High Line, so if you're interested, you might want to check that out. Across the street from Pier 66 on the east side of 12th Avenue lies a small area known as the West Chelsea Historic District. This district was designated as a historic district by the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission, LPC, in 2008. The historic buildings and cultural heritage that remain in this area reflect the historical evolution of the West Chelsea neighborhood. Through this evolution, we can gain further insight into the historical development of Manhattan. This historical significance is why the area was designated as a historic district. Unlike the skyscrapers at Hudson Yards to the north, which have been built over the past decade, the buildings in this neighborhood are more like ground scrapers. These structures were built decades ago and have been renovated to meet current and future needs. Let's take a look at a few buildings in this neighborhood. The Terminal Warehouse was developed by the Terminal Warehouse Company in 1891, built on land that was reclaimed from the river. At first glance, it looks like one large 7-story red brick building. However, it's actually divided into 25 smaller units called stores, each a separate wooden structure. These stores are separated by brick walls to create fire breaks. So if a fire started in one section, it wouldn't spread throughout the entire building. This design proved effective in several fires over the years. For instance, Store 26 was rebuilt in 1902 using reinforced concrete, and Store 3 was similarly rebuilt in 1911, even adding 2 more floors, making it 9 stories high. Between 1912 and 1914, after a fire, 6 stores, from Store 15 to Store 20, were also rebuilt with reinforced concrete and raised to 9 stories. One of the building's most distinctive features is the tunnel running through the middle of the ground floor. This allowed trains to enter from the arched entrance on 11th Avenue, pass through the building, and exit onto 12th Avenue, where they could connect to the floating docks along the Hudson River. After rail transport in the area declined, this tunnel was transformed into a popular nightclub called The Tunnel in 1987. In the early 21st century, the building continued to function primarily as a warehouse, with some sections converted into office space. Then in 2018, a joint venture between developers L&L and Normandy Real Estate bought the entire terminal warehouse for $880 million. At that time, tenants included Uber, the beauty company L'Oreal, and the architecture firm Grimshaw. The developers hired the architecture firm Cook Fox to design a modern transformation of the terminal warehouse. Their plan is to convert the space into a modern office and retail hub. The redesign was approved by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, LPC, in 2020, and construction began shortly after. The project is expected to be completed in 2024. The new design includes a large central atrium that will bring in more natural light, with the displaced volume moved to the western part of the building, where 4 new floors will be added, offering fresh facades and views of the Hudson River. The ground floor tunnel and adjacent spaces will be converted into retail and dining areas, connected to the new atrium. Another building worth mentioning is the Otis Elevator Company's headquarters, which was built in 1911. Otis occupied this building until 1974, when they sold it. In 2015, the developer Vornado bought the building and brought in the architecture firm of Richard Rogers to redesign it as a modern office space. The redesign plans were approved by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, LPC, in 2019. However, it's unclear when construction will actually start. They might still be waiting to see how the office market shapes up. The Starrett-Lehigh Building takes up an entire city block, sitting just south of the terminal warehouse and west of the Otis Elevator Building. It was completed in 1931, thanks to a collaboration between the Starrett Corporation and the Lehigh Valley Railroad. Originally, they planned it as a rail freight terminal, much like the later St. John's Terminal. The idea was to build a 15-story building that covered the whole block on each floor. But during construction, they hit a snag with the ground conditions. The area had been created through land reclamation, and they found that the soil near the river wasn't strong enough to support the original design. So, they had to make some changes, cutting the riverside portion down to 9 stories and boosting the inland part up to 18 stories, which gives us the unique building we see today. Back in the day, trains loaded with raw materials would roll right into the building from the ground level after coming off the Hudson River. The first floor columns were arranged to align perfectly with the tracks. Once inside, the goods were unloaded and sent up to small factories on the upper floors for processing. The finished products were then shipped out by small trucks to various parts of Manhattan. For example, they'd bring in loads of sugar and eggs, whip up a ton of cheesecakes inside the building, and then send them off to Manhattan stores by truck. One of the coolest features of this building is its 3 massive elevators, big enough to lift small trucks to different floors. Trucks would enter on the first floor, take the elevator up to load goods, and then head back down to exit. This smart design kept traffic flowing smoothly and effectively made each floor feel like the ground floor, a pretty innovative idea at the time. As for the Starrett-Lehigh Building, after it was completed, it attracted some notable tenants, including the famous architect Buckminster Fuller, who lived in the penthouse. In 1932, the building got even more recognition when Philip Johnson and Henry Russell Hitchcock included it in their Modern Architecture International Exhibition at MoMA. This exhibition was pivotal in defining what we now call the international style of modern architecture, which has its roots in the Bauhaus movement in Germany. The Starrett-Lehigh Building, with its signature horizontal ribbon windows, was a perfect example of this style. It was officially recognized as a New York City landmark in 1986. Initially designed as an industrial building, the Starrett-Lehigh didn't do so well financially during the Great Depression, which hit between World War I and World War II. But during the later stages of World War II, it really hit its stride, with around 5,000 people working there. As rail transport declined, the building slowly transitioned from an industrial facility to a commercial office space. In 1998, it got a major facelift, attracting media companies, art galleries, and a bunch of dot-com startups, at least until the dot-com bubble burst in 2001. More recently, in 2011, RXR Realty bought the building and gave it another makeover. They drew in tenants from specific industries and even used the original elevators to bring food trucks up to each floor. A smart move, considering the area isn't exactly known for its food options and is a bit out of the way from the subway. Starting in 2018, RXR began more renovations, adding modern office perks like a revamped lobby, a ground floor food hall, and rooftop terraces. They also transformed the spaces that used to be for small trucks into all kinds of office amenities, like employee lounges. So, while the Starrett-Lehigh Building might look the same as it did 90 years ago from the outside, it's been constantly evolving to keep up with the times. In this episode, we covered Chelsea Piers and its surrounding neighborhood. In the next episode, we'll head north and finish our exploration of Hudson River Park.